In OP09 we received a new leader in black color identity, Marshall D. Teach, also known as Blackbeard. Standard monocolor stats, 5 life, 5000 power, but he introduced new effect to the One Piece card game that reads: your on-play effects are negated. Activate main, you may trash one card from your hand, your opponent's on-play effects are negated until the end of your opponent's next turn. Powerful leader's effect that can auto-win you any matchup that relies on on-play effects. But that's not all. OP09 not only released this powerful leader, but also a lot of support in form of Blackbeard pirates themselves. The only caveat is that this deck is one of the hardest one to pilot in the game. It relies not only on strong fundamentals, but on understanding each matchup on their own and the knowledge of the general card pool. But fret not, this channel is targeted at new and beginner players, so I'm here to help you to get started with any given deck. So if Blackbeard is your favorite character or you just want to negate your opponent's game plan, let me show you the basics of Blackbeard. Before we even start talking about win conditions and deck building, we need to understand how and when to use leader's effect. In One Piece card game, discarding one card might be crucial difference between winning or losing the game. That's why it's so important to understand which on-play effects from our opponent's deck are crucial for them and negate them, and which ones we can allow to activate or don't play around them to simply preserve cards in our hand. For example, playing versus Doflamingo, we need to understand that even one activation of Jinbe on play will result with auto lose for us. Because of that, we will be activating leader's effect from turn 2 onwards. On the other hand, playing against deck like NL, we can chill until opponent's 8, 9 don't turn and just negate on play of the key big drops to prevent healing. I highly recommend you to think about the matchups you expect to face and visualize the biggest threats from these decks in head. Then you will understand much easier when and why to activate Blackbeard's leader's effect to preserve as many precious cards in hand as possible. Even though there are decks against which you will win out of your leader's effect alone, it's important to understand our main win conditions. In OP09 we have two key cards that can carry us to victory. 10 cost Marshall D. Teach, boss monster of the deck. His effect complements our leader's effect to completely shut down game plan of our opponent. Negate of leader's effect during this turn can come handy versus leaders like Shanks, NL or even Nami. However, don't use it for example against BY Luffy. If you do and push his life cards that are face up, will go straight to hand instead of bottom deck. So always communicate clearly with your opponent if you negate his leader's effect or not, as it's up to one effect. Second part of Blackbeard's effect negates effect of up to one opponent's character, and that character can't attack until the end of your opponent's turn. Key effect and our win condition. We want to try and control the board as much as possible with our leader's effect to safely drop this bad boy on 10 on turn and completely shut down our opponent's possibilities to win. On top of that, 10 cost Blackbeard is a 12,000 power blocker. If we reach game state where we are dropping back-to-back Blackbeard, it's simply GG. Second character that helps us to close the game is mid-range character, 4 cost Jesus Burgess. Simple 4 cost 5000 power character with amazing effect. He can't be KO'd by opponent's effect. This is huge. You stick him on board and most of the time the only way to remove Burgess will be to attack into him. There are very limited ways to remove a character other than on-play bounce or bottom deck abilities. But our leader's effect negates on-plays. I hope you see where this is going. The only enemy of Burgess are events, because they are activate main. Especially Gravity Blade might be backbreaking. Sticking character on board is strong, but what if I tell you he will only get stronger over time? As a black deck, we naturally care to fill up our trash and Burgess takes advantage of it. For every 4 cards in your trash, he gets plus 1000 power. It's pretty standard for Burgess to reach at least 9000 power during the game. Just remember not to attack too early with him before reaching higher power levels, as your opponent can simply attack back into him. As I already mentioned, to safely reach late game and start Blackbeard chain, we need to constantly control the board. As a black deck, we have access to very nice removal cards. Starting off with card printed in OP09 with Blackbeard Pirate stack, Dog Q. 2-cost character which makes him very easy to plant on board in the early game. Activate main effect allows you to KO 1-cost character if you rest Dog Q. Secondary effect, once Dog Q is KO'd, draw 1 card. High value card. First of all, removal effect is activate main, which makes it recurring removal if opponent leave Dog Q on board. At first, KO 1-cost might seem underwhelming, but black color has a lot of cheap minus cost effects to help reach the removal range. Once Dog Q is rested, your opponent has to attack into it, which makes him pseudo blocker that helps us preserve the life cards to reach late game and our win condition. On top of that, once he is KO'd, he replaces himself, netting you a card. Awesome utility card. Other 2 removal cards are events. Finger Pistol, also known as Shigan. Classic black card, clean 5-cost character removal for 4 Dawn. Additionally, it helps us to fill up our own trash for Burgess. Cherry on top is trigger that reads the same as main effect. If we are able to trigger this card versus aggressive matchups like Doffy, we might actually have a good chance of stabilizing and winning the game. Second removal event is Black Hole, also known as Liberation. Similar event to Finger Pistol. This time we KO 4-cost character for 4 Dawn. However, we can negate effect of one of our opponent's characters first. Quite handy versus characters with effect that prevents KO. Trigger also can come up in some niche scenarios. If your opponent waits with his leader's effect and trigger this card out of your life, you can shut down his leader's effect for a turn. In practice, it means that, for example, Doffy can't bring the character from top of a deck, or BY Luffy can't heal himself. Even though they are powerful removal cards, they are all based on cost of our opponent's characters. Therefore, we play characters with minus cost effects that help us to remove opponent's characters and force their attacks into them once rested. It helps us to preserve our life cards and safely reach late game. Laboon, 4-cost 5000 power character. Simple activate main effect. Rest this character to minus 4 cost one of opponent's characters. Together with Dog Q, we can snipe 5-cost characters now. The usual scenario is to play Dog Q on 2 Dawn turn and follow up with Laboon on turn 4, or just play both on 6 Dawn turn for removal of 5-cost character. Van Ogre, 5-cost 6000 power character. Another character printed in OP09 with Blackbeard tag. Similar to Laboon, we rest him for cost reduction. However, it's only minus 3 cost. Nonetheless, together with Dog Q, he helps us to answer opponents for cost on our 5 Dawn turn. On top of that, he is a 6000 power character that might be tricky to remove for our opponent. And even if they manage to KO him, Van Ogre draws us a card in exchange. Another high value card with Blackbeard Pirate stack. Laboon and Van Ogre are our standard reducers. They cover our curve nicely, providing some flexibility. As a rule of thumb, we want to see Laboon when going second, as it's 4-cost character, and Van Ogre when going first because of 5 cost. Next, let's speak about our defenses. 2k counters. We run only 8 copies of 2k counters. Deck space is quite limited, and in between Leader's Effect, Removal, Reducers, Jesus Burgess, 10-cost Blackbeard Effect, we have enough tools to slow down our opponent enough to reach the late game and don't need to counter anymore. Therefore, 8 copies of 2k counters are enough. And now for the characters themselves. Stronger. 2k counter with Blackbeard tag. I like to refer to him as emergency reducer. You play him for 1 Dawn, trash a card from hand, and Stronger himself to draw a card and -2 cost opponent's character. So not only he is a reducer, but also we can filter one card from our hand and fill up the trash with 2 cards for Burgess. Shiryu. Another 2k counter with Blackbeard tag. Simple free cost 4000 power character that can be an attacker if needed. And there is a benefit if you decide so. When attacking with one Dawn attached, you may trash 2 cards to draw 2. Very nice hand washing which improves consistency of the deck. And as we speak about consistency, these are the only 2k counters with Blackbeard tag. So instead of playing out of archetype once, we opt to play a Blackbeard tag champ blocker that is Vasco Shot. Champ blockers are especially strong in a deck like Blackbeard due to leader's effect. As we already noticed, a lot of removal effects require on-play effects to be active. This means most of the time we can get full value out of our champ blocker instead of them being removed. In the end, I decided to play a lot of characters with a Blackbeard Pirates type. It's because in OP09, Blackbeard Pirates received not 1, not 2, but 3 types of searchers. Lafitte is basically Bonnie Searcher. You pay 1, rest him and pick any Blackbeard Pirates card, even himself. Mayara Begins is just Spandam in form of search event. Helps us to find key pieces and fill up the trash for Burgess. And lastly, the card that makes a huge difference during the game. Ulalit Stage, also known as Hachinosu. Same effect as Kingdom of Germa. We trash a card to search top 3 every turn. Amazing value. We get our key pieces for free by filtering our hand and filling up the trash for Burgess. If you have all the mentioned cards, you can build straightforward and consistent Blackbeard's deck. The list would look something like this. In my opinion, only cards that we can change ratio of are Blocker Vasco Shot and even Black Hole, but I would play at least 2 copies of each. There is also an argument if you should play 3 or 4 copies of Stage. In my opinion, 4 copies are mandatory for consistency, but please test yourself and get your own conclusions. If you are more advanced player or like to cook decks with a lot of spicy tech cards, let me give you some ideas. Tempest Kick and Ice Age. If you feel that you are lacking cost reduction, these 2 cards should be the first consideration. Manchery and Bartolomeo. Interesting tech choice played by some Eastern players. We sacrifice a bit of consistency, but once we are able to set up Manchery loop and start recurring champ blockers, we might make a game unplayable for our opponent. On top of that, Bartolomeo is not only free cost blocker, but also a 2k counter, which makes him a perfect target for the loop. 7 cost Jack, another popular consideration, might be worth exploring for going first curve, as you can set up Van Ogre turn before. However, if we tap our reducer early and he gets removed, playing Jack on his own doesn't help much. These are the most popular choices that I noticed. Overall, for decks like Blackbeard, I always choose consistency over spicy techs, especially for bigger tournaments. But feel free to experiment and please let me know in the comments if you discover something interesting. And now, let's talk about game flow. Turn order. Looking only at our deck's curve, we would like to go second in majority of matchups. However, if we play against aggressive decks like Doffy or Purple Luffy, we should go first to have more chances to find our removal pieces early or disrupt our opponent's game plan and preserve the life. For the mulligan itself, to keep things simple, versus slow decks we can mulligan aggressively for our win conditions, 10 cost Blackbeard and Jesus Burgess. Even better if we can add into a mix Stage or any searcher. Versus aggressive decks like Doffy or Purple Luffy, or decks that win through the board like green decks, our main focus should shift into early game removal, Dock Q, and depending on curve, either Laboon or Van Ogre for early reduction to ease the aggression. Stage is always good, and if we are going first, Lafitte is clutch for the early search. For the game flow itself, some simple progression would be: going first, on 1 Dawn we can play Lafitte or Stage. On 3 Dawn we have exact number of Dawn to search with Lafitte and set up Dr. Q. On 5 Dawn turn, depending on opponent's board, we can play Laboon or Van Ogre for removal.
KO!
Or set up Burgess. 7 and 9 dawn turns are flexible depending on our opponent's actions. On 7 dawn we can simply play Ogre plus Dog Q for nice removal range, or keep developing Burgess if there is nothing to remove. Same is true for 9 dawn turn. If we need to remove something but we are lacking Dog Q, we can combo our reducers with removal events or do it traditional way by attaching the dawn and attacking into rested characters. On 10 dawn turn, most of the time we want to lock the game with 10 cost Blackbeard chain, which we should already have in hand. After all, we play 3 types of searchers. Going second. On 2 dawn we can set up Dog Q, especially crucial versus aggro decks, or we can set up searchers versus slower decks. On 4 dawn we play either Laboon to remove something or Burgess on curve if we have a free turn. On 6 dawn turn, depending on board and opponent's options, we can combo Laboon and Dog Q together or play another Burgess. On 8 dawn turn, if we were able to control the board until now, something backbreaking for the opponent might be 2 copies of Burgess followed up by 10 cost Blackbeard to lock the game. Overall, treat each game as a puzzle. We are a reactive deck, so we need a good understanding of current board state and also what is the next strongest turn of our opponent to decide if we want to use leader's effect or not. Deck is very hard to master, but it's also very rewarding if played correctly. On the other hand, one simple mistake can ruin the game. However, keep in mind that in the future, going into OP09, this is one of the strongest decks, so might be worth to start practicing today. And that's it for today. Let me know in the comments what do you think about Marshall D. Teach Leader in OP09. Thank you for watching, see you in the next video, bye bye.